Google's recent decision to get into hardware manufacturing sadly resulted in the death of the Nexus line. Nexus always stood for high performance, stock Android experience at an affordable cost, and that completely changes with the Pixels. But do you really need to pay this much price to experience vanilla Android? Google's Nexus 5X was a great device and was released last year. It was an update to the ever so popular Nexus 5, but how well does it hold up today? This is Sreehari from Mr. Phone, and let's look if the Nexus 5X is still worth it. The Nexus 5X has a respectable Full HD display. Now the reason that I say respectable is because the market is crowded with crazy 2K and 4K resolutions, and they look good, no doubt. But for an everyday user who doesn't play high-end graphic intensive games or doesn't have a special place in his heart for the virtual reality related stuff, the 1080p resolution will do just fine. And that doesn't mean that the display is bad. You can see that there's no pixelation to be found even at such close distances. It's definitely a bit on the warmer side, and compared to the Nexus 5, you can clearly see the difference. Nexus devices have been hugely criticized in the past for their shitty cameras, but this time around Google made a lot of fuss about how good the Nexus 5X's camera is. So let's go straight to the pictures and see for ourselves if there's any truth in that. In this first picture, you can clearly see that the Nexus 5's image is desaturated and looks a bit dull, while the image from the Nexus 5X looks a lot more vibrant. In this shot of a building, the sky in the Nexus 5 image is totally blown out, while the Nexus 5X manages to preserve the colors of the sky while giving out a more pleasant looking picture. In this final shot, the Nexus 5X again comes out on top with a more natural looking picture and a lot more detail, while the Nexus 5 struggles to get vibrancy and detail right. What really surprised me was the low light performance of the camera. The images that you see here were totally taken under unnatural lighting and they came out so good. The camera app is also pretty clean and simple, with basic functionality like white balance, HDR and HDR+, even reference grids built right into the software. The 12.3 megapixel sensor on the Nexus 5X is assisted by laser autofocus, and on paper that means crazy good autofocus speeds. And while that works, there are times when the camera just refuses to focus on the subject. Like in this video here, it's just not focusing on the subject, that is the flower, but when it actually does, it's slick as hell. The focus transitions from infinity to that subject is one of the smoothest that I've ever seen. Google did a pretty good job with the Nexus 5X's camera, and it is among the top rated cameras in the market even now. Nexus 5 was built out of polycarbonate plastic and was one of the most comfortable phones in hand. The story is pretty much the same with the Nexus 5X. The 5.2-inch Nexus 5X has a slightly larger footprint than the older Nexus 5, but is still a very comfortable device in hand. We have a USB Type-C port at the bottom along with a 3.5mm headphone jack. The power and volume buttons sit on the right of the device. Now I personally don't like this placement and prefer the ones on the Nexus 5 with the power button on the right and the volume buttons on the left, but that's totally a personal choice. Also, the buttons on the Nexus 5X feel a bit mushy and don't give that tactile feedback, while the buttons of the Nexus 5 were pretty amazing and have held up pretty well over the time. The Nexus 5X's camera bump comes into action when the phone is put on a flat surface, as it wobbles a lot. The Nexus 5X boasts dual front-facing speakers, and it is something every smartphone manufacturer should take a look at. Now here's how they sound. The fingerprint scanner sits at the back of the device, which according to me is the most natural position for your finger to rest. Nexus imprint is fast. Not the fastest on the market, but sufficiently fast for everyday use. And plus, it almost never fails to unlock. Software is the most important part of a Nexus. And the whole point of Nexus, and now Pixel devices, is to showcase Android in its purest form. My Nexus 5X is running Android 7.1.1, which is a developer preview. And with new versions come new features, like this one here, which gives you a lot more features when you long press on the app icon. This looks somewhat similar to the 3D Touch implementation on the iPhone. And finally, we have multi-window in Android Nougat. This was a long time coming to Android, and you can see how well it has been implemented into the system. The window resizing is pretty slick, and although a 5.2-inch device wouldn't benefit much from the multi-window feature, it would do wonders on a bigger screen like a tablet. All in all, being a Nexus, the 5X will be among the first devices to be updated when new versions come out. And according to Google's official update cycle, the 5X will receive updates till September 2017. But even after that, you don't need to worry. It's a Nexus after all. The whole Android community is readily building ROMs for the Nexus devices. Plus, even when the update cycle ends, the other devices will take months to get to the version that the Nexus 5X will be at. In the year 2015, Qualcomm's flagship processor was an 8-core Snapdragon 810. Remove 2 cores and you get the Snapdragon 808 powering the Nexus 5X. Now both these processors were hugely criticized due to their overheating issues. And while Qualcomm released several versions of these chipsets, they just couldn't get it right. Taking a look at some benchmarks, we have the Nexus 5 on the left and the 5X on the right. And you can see that there's a significant bump up in performance. Now this definitely doesn't mean that the phone's gonna go Note 7 crazy on you. If you're someone who enjoys high-end stuff like graphic intensive gaming, and that too for long hours, you need to look elsewhere. But for an average everyday user, the Nexus 5X handles tasks like a boss, with smooth scrolling, fast app opening speeds, and even casual gaming with almost no lag. It's stock Android, and the fact is that you don't need crazy ass hardware to run stock Android smoothly. The Nexus 5X has a 2700 mAh battery. Now this is a bit on the smaller side, but a significant bump up from the 2300 mAh on the Nexus 5. Now I was constantly getting a screen on time of 3 to 4 hours on moderate to high usage. This is average by today's standards, but with fast charging, you can juice up the battery from 0 to 100 in little more than an hour. A good display, great camera, a respectable build quality, Google's official software, smooth performance, and an average battery life with fast charging. So who is it for? It's definitely not for those spec-hungry people, because you can clearly find better spec devices in similar price range. But it is for someone who wants Google's clean and updated software at a price that won't hurt the pocket. Hit the like button below if you liked this video. Hit the subscribe button if you loved it. For more smartphone videos and stories, download the Mr. Phone app linked in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.